everybody, welcome back to my channel and happy Harloween. Today is the first day of Harloween, and I am so excited. I look forward to Harloween every single year. We've been doing this is our third year now doing Harloween, and for those of you who are new and don't know what Harloween is, every video in October is going to have some sort of spooky vibe to it, whether it be paranormal or just terrifying, because it's spooky season. It is the most wonderful time of the year, and I'm here to share it with you. Today, we're going to talk about one of the scariest stories I've heard in a while. And I remember when I was researching the bulk of this, I was in Nashville last month, and I was alone in my hotel room, and I was terrified. Alone in my hotel room, I kept hearing noises, I kept feeling like breezes. I was just terrified. I completely spooked myself out. And unlike some of these tales of possession, this one is different because we have multiple reliable sources who have given credible testimony about these things happening. Individuals including CPS employees, doctors, nurses, and law enforcement personnel. Most of you probably know who Zak Bagans is, but in case you don't, let me quickly introduce him to you. Zak Bagans is a well-known paranormal investigator, and he hosts Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. He is also the owner and operator of the Zak Bagans Haunted Museum, located in downtown Las Vegas. Zak has spent many years collecting stories and information about supernatural events and experiences, but he is also a collector of paranormal objects, such as Dr. Jack Kevorkian's VW van, where he ended the lives of many of his patients, and the Dybbuk box, which is considered to be the world's most haunted object. In his museum, you can also see a rickety wooden staircase from a house in Gary, Indiana, a house that no longer exists because after Zak purchased it in 2014, he had it demolished, saying, quote, "Something inside that house had the ability to do things that I have never seen before, things that others carrying the highest form of credibility couldn't explain either. There was something there that was very dark, yet highly intelligent and powerful," end quote. So what spooked Zak Bagans? What could have possibly caused a man who's been chasing after all things supernatural and dark since he was a child to completely level an entire house? It must have been something pretty scary and pretty evil, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The Demon House of Gary, Indiana, and the family who lived there and whose lives were turned upside down by whatever it was that was living there with them. But before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Helix Sleep. Sleep is incredibly important, and nothing has shown me that more than the last couple of weeks while I've been staying up late and getting up early to prepare for Harloween. I've had my Helix mattress for a while. It's the Midnight Luxe. I think it is the best mattress out there, but I felt guilty that I was getting such good sleep, so I got a few more for everyone else, and now almost every mattress in our house is a Helix Sleep mattress. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses and bedding that are customized to fit your needs, and they're shipped right to your front door. Everyone sleeps differently. Some people are just fine with only a few hours. Others can't even, face the world until they've had their 8 hours and a few cups of coffee. Some like to sleep on their sides. Others like to sleep on their backs. Some people like to sleep on their stomachs, which is crazy to me. I don't understand it. I feel like I'm suffocating, but you guys do you. But there you have it. Helix knows that every single person is different. That's why they made the sleep quiz to match your unique body type and sleep preferences to make the perfect mattress for you. I am personally a side sleeper. I like a firm mattress, with a little give, because who doesn't want to be supported? Am I right? I've been sleeping on my Helix mattress for about 2 years now, and what I like most about it is waking up the next morning without aches and pains. I used to move a lot at night, but I've been tossing and turning so much less. Sometimes I wake up in the exact same position I fell asleep in, and I feel great. And at first, my husband, he was skeptical because he likes to do a lot of research before making a commitment to something, a product, but he's completely sold on our Helix mattress now, and at least 3 times a week, when we, go to bed at night and we get into the bed, he sighs and he looks at me and he says, I love this bed because it's so comfortable. Taking the quiz and buying a mattress on Helix website is so easy, and the best part is it arrives at your front door all rolled up in a box, and it's so simple to set up yourself. The box is like little, and then it just comes out and you're like, well, how did you fit into there? It's like when you're at the circus and you see all the clowns get out of the car. That's what it's like. And if you're like my husband and you're nervous to buy something that you haven't tried, Helix gives you a 100-night sleep trial. The mattress is yours to try out, sleep on for a few days or a few weeks or a few months, do whatever it is you do in bed to make sure that the Helix mattress is going to be compatible for whatever it is you're doing in bed. And if you really don't like it, Helix will pick it up for you. You'll get a full refund. With every Helix sleep mattress, you will also get a 10-year warranty, and delivery is free within the U.S. We love our Helix sleep mattresses, and besides having a great product, they are a really great company with a lot of nice people working there. I legit love the folks at Helix. They're so kind, they're so helpful, and it really shows how very seriously they take customer service and customer experience. So if you've been looking for a new mattress and you want to get a better night's sleep, click the link below or go to helixsleep.com/Harlowe to get $200 off your Helix sleep mattress plus 2 free pillows. And don't try to take my husband's Helix pillow away from him or he will cut you. Seriously. Like I tried it once. Don't do it. Thank you so much to Helix for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in to the first video of Harloween 2021. Gary, Indiana is 25 miles away from Chicago, Illinois. Once a prosperous steel town, Gary has become a different place due to the restructuring of the steel industry and overseas competition. And today, it suffers from above-average unemployment and a decaying infrastructure. Gary also saw a huge population decrease because when the jobs left, many people followed, and it is estimated that nearly 1/3 of all of the houses in the city are either unoccupied or abandoned. But in the 1960s, Gary was known as the Magic City, with state-of-the-art architecture, cutting-edge entertainment, and a bustling economy. But by 1972, it was a ghost of the grand city it had once been. Today, over 80% of Gary's population is Black because when the jobs left the city, the white people who could afford to leave also left. 78-year-old Walter Bell, a longtime resident of Gary, told The Guardian, quote, "They wouldn't let us into their new neighborhoods with good jobs, or if they let us, we sure as hell couldn't afford it. Then to make it worse, when we looked at the nice houses they left behind, we couldn't buy them because the banks wouldn't lend us money." End quote. Another resident of Gary said, quote, "We used to be the murder capital of the U.S., but there is hardly anybody left to kill. We used to be the drug capital of the U.S., but for that, you need money, and there aren't jobs or things to steal here." End quote. And this was the landscape Latoya Amans, her 3 children, and her mother Rosa found themselves in when they moved into a rented house at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, in November of 2011. Strange happenings started almost immediately. By December, big black flies had swarmed their screened-in porch, even though temperatures were freezing. Latoya's mother, Rosa, would later say that they would keep killing the flies, but the next day, there would be more flies.
I noticed there was like horse flies on the inside porch, and this was, the beginning of winter, so that was very odd to me.
Spiritually, flies often have a positive meaning, but in the Bible, flies represent everything that is evil and bad. It is said that flies are the descendants of Satan. Inside the house, strange things were reported to be happening as well. When the family was in bed, they would hear sounds. Sometimes they would hear footsteps climbing up the basement stairs, and the creak of the door leading from the basement to the kitchen opening. Sometimes Latoya or Rosa would get up to investigate, but there was never anybody there. They decided to start locking the basement door at night, but even after that, the noises continued. Sometimes they would hear an incessant banging on the basement door, or the low sound of growling as if a wild animal had taken up residence in their home.
We would lock the basement door, and you would hear something hit the door, boom, and you would hear dogs barking. No dogs outside, no dogs. We would go look, no dogs.
Rosa remembered one night she'd fallen asleep on the living room couch, and she woke up in the middle of the night to see a dark, shadowy figure of a man pacing in the living room. She darted up and turned on the lights, but the figure had vanished. However, left behind on the living room floor, Rosa found large, wet boot marks, as if someone had been walking around inside with wet shoes. By March of 2012, the entire family was thoroughly terrified, and they wondered what dark forces were inhabiting their rented house. On March 10th, LaToya, her mother Rosa, and the children were all up late mourning the death of a loved one with some family members and friends. As the adults chatted, LaToya's 12-year-old daughter claimed she had been pulled off the couch by an unseen force, and one of LaToya's sons was thrown into a freezer. At around 2 a.m., after the kids had settled into bed for the night, the adults heard a piercing scream come from Rosa's room, where LaToya's daughter was sleeping that night. LaToya went into the room and turned the light on. Her mother, Rosa, from another room, heard her daughter screaming for her, and she rushed in to see her 12-year-old granddaughter levitating above the bed. Others came into the room to see what the commotion was, and they circled the bed and began praying. Rosa remembered being terrified and wondering, why was this happening? After a few minutes of this, the young girl dropped back onto the bed, and when she woke up, she didn't remember anything that had happened. So this is an area where you have several witnesses that are not directly related to this family. So you have extended family members and you have friends, but you have a ton of people that were there that night who witnessed this, who saw it happening, and who have claimed to have seen it happening. And after their friends and, family members left that evening, these people refused to come back to the house. After this, the activity in the house began to pick up. LaToya's oldest son claimed that doors would slam and objects would move around as if being held by invisible hands. Her youngest son was once thrown from the bathroom when no one was physically near him. LaToya would later tell the Department of Children's Services that if the children were not asleep by 11 p.m., the spirits would come out and keep them up all night, throwing things around, moving things around, making loud noises, grabbing them when they were in bed, things that were just very disruptive. LaToya and Rosa didn't know what to do or what was happening, but they knew they needed help, so they began calling around to local churches, searching for someone who had expertise in these sorts of matters. Most of the people they spoke to refused to help, but the minister from one small church did visit the home and told LaToya that the house was inhabited by spirits. He recommended scrubbing the house down with bleach and ammonia, and then instructed LaToya and Rosa to use oil and then draw crosses on all the doors and windows in the house, as well as anointing all members of the family with oil. This would be done as a means of protection to prevent whatever was in the house from being powerful, to prevent other things from coming into the house, and to also prevent the family members from being possessed by whatever was in the house. LaToya and Rosa also contacted 2 clairvoyants who did an investigation at the house and then informed the family that their home was infested with more than 200 spirits. But they weren't just any spirits. They were strong, demonic spirits, and their forces were emanating specifically from the basement. The clairvoyants told LaToya that the best thing she could do was leave, but LaToya, as a single mother, had nowhere else to go. She'd been lucky enough to rent the Carolina Street house for a bargain. It was big enough for the family, there was enough rooms for everybody, it was cheap. And by that time, there was no money for down payments or moving expenses. Hearing this, the clairvoyant suggested that LaToya create a shrine in the basement and purify the house. So LaToya set up a table in the cold and barren basement, covered it with a tablecloth, and placed a lit, pure white candle on it, next to a statue of the Holy Family. LaToya then dressed all in white and went through the house with a burning stick of sage, reading from Psalm 91 and invoking God's protection before placing her Bible in the middle of that basement shrine.
No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling, for he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways.
After 3 days passed without incident, LaToya and Rosa felt that they had solved the problem. But then the activity came back. and it was worse than ever before. LaToya Ammons would later tell the Indy Star that she believed she and her 3 children had been possessed by demons. She said the eyes of her children would bulge, their eyes became lifeless and flat, and evil smiles would cross their faces. When they were in this state and they spoke, their voices were notably deeper and without emotion. Sometimes they would even speak in strange languages. LaToya's youngest son, who was 7, took to sitting in a closet by himself, and he would be heard talking inside of it as if he was participating in a conversation. When he was asked who he was talking to, he would say that there was a young boy in the closet with him, explaining to him what it felt like to be killed. The oldest child, LaToya's 12-year-old daughter, claimed she would be choked by invisible hands and she could not move or speak. All she could do was lay there in a panic, hearing a voice in her head tell her that she would be dead within 20 minutes and she would never see her family again. It got so bad that LaToya and Rosa, despite their slim finances, were taking the kids to hotels to sleep at night, but this became financially impossible, so they decided to bring the kids to their family doctor, Jeffrey Onikiwa, on April 12, 2012. Dr. Onikiwa has been approached multiple times since for comment, but because of doctor-patient privilege, he's refused to give details, besides to tell the Indy Star that it was bizarre. His visit with the Ammons family that day was absolutely bizarre. He said, quote, 20 years, and I've never heard anything like that in my life. I was scared myself when I walked into the room, end quote. However, what happened next is documented in a DCS report. Both of LaToya's sons began to yell at the doctor and curse at him in demonic, deep voices. The doctor and a nurse who were present witnessed the youngest boy being lifted up and thrown into the wall, but no one was touching him. And then both of the boys passed out, and they would not wake up. Someone at the doctor's office called the police, and the children were transferred to Methodist Hospital, where they eventually did come to. LaToya's 9-year-old son initially seemed to be just fine and he was behaving normally, but his younger brother woke up in a rage and began screaming and thrashing around, kicking his arms and his legs. LaToya claimed it took 5 men to hold him down. No one knew what was happening, but many people on the hospital staff, they scoffed when LaToya told them that her children were possessed by demons. She said she wanted to get some oil, she wanted to have a priest come in and bless them, and the people at the hospital laughed at her, and then someone called DCS, Department of Children's Services, claiming that the children were being abused in some way. They didn't quite know how the children were being abused, but there was something going on, and it seemed that the kids were putting on a show and performing for their mother. And in turn, LaToya was encouraging the behavior by believing that they were actually possessed and telling them so. Valerie Washington was a CPS agent, and she was assigned to the Ammons family as their caseworker. She arrived at the hospital to handle the initial investigation, and she observed as the hospital staff examined LaToya and her 3 children, finding them to be free of any marks or bruises. A hospital psychiatrist also examined LaToya and concluded that she was of sound mind. Valerie Washington wrote in her report what happened next. She began to interview LaToya's 2 sons, and when she asked them a question, the 7-year-old began growling at her, and he showed Valerie his teeth while his eyes rolled back in his head. The younger boy then launched himself at his older brother and wrapped his hands around the 9-year-old's throat, refusing to let go. His hands needed to be pried off by the adults in the room. They took a break after this and reconvened later in an exam room. A registered nurse who worked at the hospital named Willie Lee Walker was with Valerie and Rosa in the room, so besides their grandmother, there were 2 unbiased people not related to these kids who were present to testify to what happened. Valerie said that the 7-year-old stared into his brother's eyes and began growling again, saying in a deep voice, "It's time to die. I will kill you." Then the older brother began headbutting his grandmother Rosa in the stomach, so she grabbed his hands, she held on tight, and she began praying out loud. In Valerie Washington's report, she wrote that the 9-year-old stated that a ghost was attacking himself and his brother. He then became aggressive and walked up the wall as if he was walking on the floor while still holding his grandmother's hands. He then did a flip over Rosa and landed on his feet. So this was seen by a bunch of people. I mean, not a bunch, but more than one, right? More than one, and most of these people had no personal interest in supporting Rosa and LaToya's story. So you've got Rosa there, the boy's grandmother. You've got Valerie Washington there, the caseworker from CPS. You've got Willie Lee Walker, the nurse, and you had a psych counselor there as well. And this little boy, his grandmother's holding his hands, and he walks backwards up the wall, flips over her, and lands on his feet. And they saw this happen. Willie Lee Walker corroborated Valerie's account of what happened in that exam room, and he and Rosa were so terrified by what they had just seen, they both ran from the room, screaming. Later, Willie Walker would say that the boy was not himself when he did that. A doctor came into the room and he asked the 9-year-old boy to walk up the wall again, because at this point the word's getting around the hospital. So this doctor, he's probably some old guy, and he's like, I don't believe in such things. Young man, please walk yourself up that wall again. But the boy claimed he didn't know what the doctor was talking about. He didn't remember doing any of it. He actually said, what are you talking about? I can't walk up a wall. When the boy attempted to try to walk up the wall, he could not get his balance or place his feet properly to do it, because it's impossible to walk up a wall. It's just gravity and physics, those things. LaToya's son, who had walked backwards up a wall, stayed in the hospital overnight because apparently they thought they had something to cure wall walking at the hospital. And the next day was actually his 8th birthday, so his family returned with a small cake to celebrate. And at this point, Valerie Washington informed LaToya that her 3 children were being removed from her care pending a more in-depth investigation. LaToya's son, the one who had been seen walking up the wall, was placed in a Christian haven after several mental health facilities denied admitting him. The younger son and LaToya's daughter were placed at the Carmelite home in Chicago, and LaToya was understandably upset. You go to the doctor for help for demonic possession, next thing you know, your kids aren't with you anymore. And her children were devastated at the idea of being separated from their mother and each other. In her report, Valerie Washington wrote that the Gary police had been inside the home and found that it was clean, with plenty of food, but there were multiple religious shrines and Bibles throughout. Is that illegal, Valerie? Is it illegal to have Bibles and shrines around your house? Sorry, it just blows my mind that the multiple children that are being abused every day, that CPS is just like, well, there's nothing we can do. But these kids, no marks on their bodies, clean house, plenty of food, religious shrines and Bibles? Take the kids out of there. Take them out. It was also discovered that there had been a previous call to DCS regarding educational neglect. Apparently, the children had been missing a lot of school, but LaToya explained that it wasn't as if she was purposely keeping them home from school. She felt education was very, very important. She was keeping them out of school because sometimes the spirits would make them sick or keep them up all night, so that in the morning they were too exhausted to wake up. LaToya Amans later said, quote, "We'd already been through so much and fought so hard for our lives. It was obvious we were a team, and we were beating it, whatever we were fighting. We made it through as a team, and they separated us." End quote. Valerie Washington wrote in her report that all the children were suffering extreme spiritual and emotional distress, but she couldn't figure out exactly why. However, someone at the hospital did appear to believe some of what LaToya was claiming, the hospital chaplain, and this man called Father Michael Maginot from the St. Stephen Church in Maryville on the morning of April 20th, 2002. Father Maginot said that the chaplain requested he perform an exorcism on the small boy who had walked up a wall. Father Maginot was like, I don't know what you're talking about. We can't just be going around and doing exorcisms. We have to get, approval from the Catholic Church. We have to go through paperwork. It's not the 1500s. We actually have a process now. But I will meet with the family and try to get to the bottom of it before planning for an exorcism. Father Maginot believed he needed to go to the house, talk to LaToya, talk to Rosa, and rule out other factors. Was there something else happening at the house that was the cause for what they were reporting? Something besides demonic possession or a haunting. Father Maginot went to the house on Carolina Street the following Sunday, April 22nd, and he sat with LaToya and Rosa in the living room talking for 2 hours. During this time, Rosa pointed out to Father Maginot that there was a light flickering on and off in the bathroom, so he walked over to check it out. But each time he did this, the flickering light stopped, and Father Maginot would later tell the Star, quote, "It must have been scared of me," end quote.
Several staff members saw this boy walking up the wall backwards, flipping over the grandmother's head who was holding him, and sat down and turned at them and had with white eyes. So I went to the house on that Sunday. And I was thinking the children were possessed, but and trying to find out about that. Then I discovered, she was possessed, and so I put the crucifix on her to test it. She began convulsing, and so I took it off. I said, "Okay, yeah," and then she stopped. Yeah, so I said, "Oh, you there is something." Definitely there. The lights would flicker in the bathroom, and then I would go over there to take a closer look. And the moment I got to the bathroom, they would stop flickering.
Father Maginot witnessed many other things during his first visit to the Amans home. He saw Venetian blinds swaying in the living room, even though there was no current of air. He saw wet footprints appear on the living room floor, and he witnessed LaToya complaining of a headache. And when Father Maginot placed a crucifix on her forehead, she began to convulse. Father Maginot also saw the Venetian blind rod in the kitchen swinging back and forth, and this activity would continue, going from window to window, swaying in sync and in time as if they had coordinated. In LaToya's bedroom, Father Maginot noticed that it seemed a couple of ounces of oil had been dripped onto the blinds, and LaToya told him it was the olive oil in the sign of the cross that she'd placed on all the doors and windows of the house. But she had done this months ago, and LaToya claimed that the liquid would sometimes dry up, but then it would return wet and oily again, as if it had just been placed there. After 4 hours of this, Father Maginot was sure that the family and their house was being terrorized by demons and ghosts. He blessed the house, reading from the Bible and sprinkling holy water in each room before leaving. On his way out, Father Maginot begged LaToya and Rosa to leave the house because it wasn't safe for them. Something hostile was there, something dark, something that may have been toying with LaToya and Rosa, like a cat playing with a mouse, but very soon that cat was going to release its claws. The women agreed, and they moved in temporarily with a relative. The next day, LaToya called Father Maginot to tell him that they had slept at her brother's house the night before, where Rosa and LaToya were sharing a bedroom. That night, Rosa was woken up when the covers were pulled off her feet, and when she looked over at her daughter's bed, she noticed that LaToya's feet had been exposed as well, as if some unseen force had flown to them in the night and just exposed their feet, because there's nothing worse than chilly feet when you're trying to sleep. That's the truth. A week later, Valerie Washington, accompanied by a Lake County police officer, met with LaToya and Rosa back at the Carolina Street House. With them were 2 other police officers from Gary, who wanted to come along out of professional curiosity. By now, the events that had happened at the hospital were well known by the local police force, and this house in general was already well known by the local police force. LaToya greeted her visitors, but she refused to enter the house, so Valerie and the police officers went inside and began walking from room to room. The main floor of this house had 3 bedrooms, a living room, 1 bathroom, and a small open-style kitchen with hardwoods throughout the home. There was a door in the kitchen that led down to a concrete-floored basement. Well, the basement was almost entirely concrete, except for a space underneath the basement stairs, where the concrete was jagged, as if it had been broken, and all that was left was a small area of dirt. Rosa had told the police that something seemed to be present underneath those basement stairs. Something was coming out of it. There was an energy that was dark and negative when you were by it. So it was one of the first places that the police and Valerie Washington checked when they were at the house. While in the basement, according to police records, one of the officers' recorders, audio recorders, began malfunctioning. The power light would flash as it would if the batteries were dying, but he had specifically replaced the batteries with new ones right before coming to that house. Another police officer on site was able to record some audio, and once again, according to Lake County Police records, when the audio was played back, they could hear a voice whispering, "Hey." I'm going to play you a clip of this. Let me know in the comments if you hear what I'm hearing, because I hear it, and it creeps me out. It terrifies me. I hear the hay. I hear the hay.
Well, let's see if we got anything. Yeah, who brought in the cat? Yeah, I don't,
I'm going to ask.
Yeah. Huh. But they said, they would hear stuff in the basement.
Wait a minute, hold it. Somebody was burning candles back here, too. Look.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, somebody was burning candles back there, too. Wait a minute, hold it. They were burning candles there also.
Oh, they're burning stuff all over the place here.
That's where.
I'm surprised the fire department hasn't been here. I'm surprised the fire department hasn't been here.
The police also took photos in the house, and in photos taken of the basement stairs, a cloudy white image could be seen in the upper right-hand corner. When enlarged, the cloudy white image appeared to resemble the face of a little boy, and it also revealed a second green image, which was less focused and more indistinct. And this green, indistinct, blurry sort of cloud, once zoomed in, resembled a woman's face. Chief Brian Miller of the Hammond Police Department noticed that there were two doors in the basement, one that they had come through from the kitchen leading down into the basement, and one that was off to the left and led to a smaller room off the main basement room. Miller said, quote, "The one on the left that actually goes into the room, at various times in the basement, it was in a different position, and none of us had went into that room," end quote. So basically, the door in the basement, down in the basement, like every time they looked at it, it would be open more, or closed more, or opened more, or closed more. And they said they never went into it. Now, it could be air currents, or it could be a ghost. I mean, right? Both things could be possible. One of the law enforcement officials at the house that day was Police Captain Charles Austin, a cop with 35 years of experience. He claimed that initially, he had thought LaToya and her family had concocted this strange tale for money or attention, but after being present at the house that day, he was a believer. He was the one who had taken the pictures in the basement with his iPhone, and then he looked at them later, and he saw what he believed were these strange silhouettes, a little boy and the woman on the stairs of the basement. After leaving the house, the radio in his police-issued vehicle malfunctioned on his way home. He stopped to get gas when all of a sudden the radio went to all static before a voice growled out of the speakers saying, "Who is that?"
Do you believe that house is possessed by demons?
I do. I feel that it's something very bad going on in that house.
When he arrived home, Charles Austin claims that his garage would not open, even though his house had power, as did all the other houses on his street. Austin came to the conclusion, because of everything that had transpired and what he had witnessed, that whatever was in that house was coming from underneath the basement stairs and was causing the whole house to turn on the Emmons family and anyone else who entered. After that, many unfortunate things happened to Charles Austin. It was almost as if whatever had been in that house had followed him home. The driver's seat in his personal vehicle began to move back and forth on its own while he was driving, and when he brought it to the Infiniti dealership to get checked out, the mechanic told him that the motor on the seat was broken, which would most likely have led to an accident if not fixed right away. They also couldn't tell him why it was broken, what had happened. They didn't see any damage. And usually when something's broken, it would stop working. But this seat motor, it didn't just stop working. It almost took on a life of its own, as if it was trying to cause Charles Austin to get into an accident. Austin would also find himself the victim of several accidents which would leave him injured or hospitalized, and he wasn't the only one. On May 10th, 2012, LaToya, her mother Rosa, and two police officers from the initial visit went back to the house. They were joined by Father Maginot, two different Lake County police officers, a police dog, and a DCS family case manager, Samantha Illick. Samantha Illick was now the Amons family's case manager because Valerie Washington, the family's previous caseworker, had refused to return to the house. In fact, soon after, Valerie would quit her job and move out of Gary. She claims that what she witnessed that day in the hospital was beyond the capabilities of her mind, and definitely beyond the capabilities of a 9-year-old boy, and as a result, she sustained emotional and mental trauma. Valerie said she'd been a child fatality worker, and because of that, she'd witnessed many horrible things, children being killed, but this event was too much for her, and she had to seek mental health help and step back from her job. The police dog didn't pick up on anything of interest in the house, so the whole group ventured into the basement because Father Maginot wanted to check the dirt under the stairs for some object that might have been cursed, or maybe the remains of a person who had been murdered in the house and buried there, something to explain the activity in the house. While the men began digging, Samantha Illick saw a strange liquid dripping down the basement walls, and without thinking, she touched her fingertips to it, claiming that it had felt slippery yet sticky. She then walked back over to the stairs where a 4-foot by 3-foot hole had been dug and some items had been unearthed. They found a pink press-on nail, a white pair of women's underwear, a lid that appeared to belong to a small cooking pan, a small pair of socks, candy wrappers, and a heavy metal object that looked like a cord weight for a drapery. They filled the hole back in, they put the stuff back in there, and Father Maginot spread some salt under the stairs and said a blessing. Right around this time, Samantha Illick's pinky finger began to tingle and turn white. Within minutes, half of Samantha's hand was white, and she said it felt broken. She began to have trouble breathing, and she started feeling as if she was having a panic attack, so Samantha left the house and joined LaToya outside, but apparently she had not gotten out of there soon enough because her hand was completely, half of it, I'll show you a picture, it was white, the blood was just drained out of it, and it hurt. And then over the course of the next 30 days, Samantha Illick would suffer multiple accidents. She got in a jet skiing accident, broke 3 of her ribs. She suffered 3rd-degree burns from a motorcycle accident. She broke her hand after hitting a table, and she broke her ankle while running. It was as if something had followed her out of that house, right? The police officers still inside the house continued to look around, except for Charles Austin, who left as soon as it started to get dark. He did not want to be in that house when night came. Chief Brian Miller also noticed an oily substance, but he noticed it dripping down the Venetian blinds in one of the bedrooms upstairs, and after taking a closer look, he couldn't figure out where the oil was coming from. He said the substance wasn't dripping from the top, as you would expect, because, gravity, once again, gravity and physics. But on these blinds, it was dripping down the middle. The police photographed the substance on the blinds. They cleaned off the blinds and then sealed the room so that no one could go in or out. They entered the room 40 minutes later and found the oily substance dripping down the blinds again. So this time they went outside and they shined a light on the exterior of the window to see if the oil was coming from outside, but they were never able to determine the source or what the oily substance was. And every time it would get wiped off, it would come back. Chief Hammond said, quote, "I went on the investigation from the very beginning thinking it was a hoax. The more investigating we did, I believed there was something there. There are just too many people that I know who are truthful people who saw things, some of which I saw, to discount everything." End quote. The landlord of the house, Charles Reed, also believed that LaToya and her family were lying, claiming he figured that this was just like a scam to get money, or they were just doing something, to raise their profile. Charles Reed said he had owned the house for over a decade and no previous tenants had ever complained about strange events. He said that his belief system had a hard time jumping over that bridge.
LaToya took me inside the house and showed me different stuff. I didn't see anything that was relevant to what she said, even though other people did. So I was very skeptical. I just figured she owed me money and this is a fabricated story. And that's not strange to my walk of life. That does happen, Like I said, I thought I heard it all. This is a new one to me. There's 5 people that saw this happen. And they're, different walks of life. That does change things a little bit. I have it hard to believe that all 5 of those people will say this just to be saying it.
But a previous tenant told Zach Baggins that other people had experienced things in that house that had caused them to quit their jobs and move out of the state. One day, after Zach had purchased the house and he was there looking around, a woman drove by who had lived in the house during the 90s with her family. She'd been 10 when they moved in, and they had lived there for roughly 5 years. This woman's name was Mika, and she later claimed she remembered she would sometimes hear footsteps when no one else was home. Or she had a friend that was always over, and when that friend was home and nobody else was home, the friend constantly heard footsteps. And Mika never wanted to go into the basement the entire time she lived there because she was afraid of it. Zach invited her into the house, and they did go into the basement. And while down there, Mika claimed she felt someone kick her. Zach's film crew had been filming the whole time, and later when they reviewed the footage, they could see Mika reacting to something, like flinching as if she'd been kicked, but no one had been even standing near her at the time. Mika also told Zach that she used to have bad dreams while living at the house, dreams where she was told someone she knew was going to die soon. Mika said, quote, "Then my brother, who used to live in the basement, was shot and killed. No one I knew would listen to me, and then it happened. And that's why I don't go down in the basement," end quote. While Mika was there and walking around the house, the camera crew's microphones picked up the sound of a voice, and it was a woman's voice, and it sounded like she was saying, "Run, LaToya, run, LaToya." You guys should watch Zach Baggins' documentary. I watched it on Amazon Prime while I was in Nashville alone in my hotel room, terrified, very, very scared. So I watched it on Amazon Prime, but if you have Amazon Prime or you have a way to watch it, you should, because some of it's filler, but some of it is actually super creepy. After this, Zach set up an altar in the living room, but moments later, he claims something came over him that he could not explain, and he became very aggressive, even attacking a member of his own crew. So they all got him out of the house, and they drove around for an hour trying to clear his head, get him away from the house, because they felt something in the house was causing him to be violent and aggressive and not himself. But then they got a call from a neighbor claiming that there was a person outside the house on Carolina Street trying to break in. Zach called the police, and then they drove right back to the house to meet the police. But when the police officers got there, they refused to enter the house, claiming they didn't want something following them home. And this is all on camera. You can see it in Zach's documentary on the house. The police show up, and Zach's like, "What are we going to do?" And the cops are like, "We're not going in there, dude." Doesn't look like anybody's robbing it now, but we're not going to go in there and check because we don't want to be haunted. Now, when Mika had visited the house, she'd been accompanied by her 3 young children. 2 days after being at the house, Mika's teenage daughter Erica became irrationally angry and aggressive and threatened to kill her mother in her sleep. Erica then became very calm, and her cousin noticed that Erica's eyes were red and there were cuts on her wrist. Erica had been cutting herself and hurting herself, and then Erica attempted to take her own life by overdosing and stabbing herself. So she had to be admitted to the hospital, where it was then discovered the number 6 had been carved into her back. Father Maginot performed an exorcism on Erica 3 weeks later, and afterwards Erica could not remember stabbing herself, being hospitalized, any of it really. A neighbor on Carolina Street also told Zach Baggins that 5 people had died in 3860 Carolina Street, and one of them had been a little boy who had died in the basement room, the very same room Mika's brother had been living in when he had been murdered. The same room the police saw that when they were noticing the door kept changing positions and opening and closing while they were in the basement. Father Maginot would eventually get permission from the church to perform an exorcism on LaToya. He first performed an intense blessing on the house to expel the bad spirits, and he then performed a minor exorcism on LaToya, which consisted of prayers, statements, and appeals to cast out demons. Present at the time were 2 police officers and Samantha Illick, the caseworker, who claimed she had chills during the entire 2-hour rite. Illick said, quote, "We felt like someone was in the room with you, breathing down your neck," end quote. After this rite, Father Maginot told LaToya to look up the names of the demons who were tormenting her, because according to him, a name has power, and he needed as much power as he could get to fight the demons. LaToya looked up demons that matched with the problems she and her children were experiencing and came up with 2 names. Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, was one of them, but LaToya also claimed that other high-ranking demons were assigned to her, which has to make you feel good a little bit at the end, right? Like, at least they sent the captains, the lords of the demon world, not, just some peasant demons, not some underlings. You got some high-level demons on you. If it was me, I would find that to be a silver lining, I think. Like, I'm being possessed, but at least they sent the badassiest demons to do it, right? So I'm pretty strong. They're threatened by me. I am so powerful. Overall, 3 major exorcisms were performed on LaToya, 2 in English and 1 in Latin, during which Father Maginot pressed a crucifix to her head, praised God, and condemned the devil. During the last exorcism, which took place in June of 2012, Father Maginot claimed he could feel how strong the demons were due to how much LaToya was convulsing. LaToya said she felt as if there was something inside of her that was trying to hold on and inflict pain. It was as intense as giving birth, but far more painful. 2 police officers who had stayed close to LaToya and were invested in seeing her be freed from whatever had been haunting her stood nearby in case she needed to be restrained so as not to hurt herself from the convulsions. After several hours of this, LaToya Amans passed out from exhaustion, and when she woke up, the nightmare seemed to be over. So it looked like the Latin exorcism was far more effective than the English exorcism, which makes a lot of sense, Father Maginot. You should have led with the Latin one. Like, lead with Latin. That should be a saying. Lead with Latin, because demons speak Latin. They don't speak English. Everyone knows that. 6 months after mother and children had been separated, LaToya was reunited with her 3 kids. She and Rosa had left Gary and moved to Indianapolis, and LaToya recalls that her children being returned to her was the happiest day of her life. When DCS had taken temporary custody of the children in April of 2012, they had each been evaluated by clinical psychologists. Stacy Wright examined the youngest son, and she said the boy tended to act possessed when he was challenged, redirected, or asked questions that he did not want to answer. The boy seemed coherent and logical, unless he was talking about demons, and at that point his stories would become bizarre, fragmented, and illogical, with his stories changing each time he told them. He would also often change the subject, asking Stacy Wright questions about outer space or asking her to solve math problems. In her report, Wright wrote that she did not believe the child was suffering from a true psychotic disorder, saying, quote, "This appears to be an unfortunate and sad case of a child who has been induced into a delusional system perpetuated by his mother and potentially reinforced by other relatives," end quote. That was fancy doctor speak for LaToya was basically brainwashing her kids, some Munchausen by proxy shit here. I'm not saying that's what I believe. I'm just saying that's basically what Stacy Wright was saying, that these kids were acting possessed because their mother had convinced them that they were. Joel Swartz, another clinical psychologist, evaluated the older son and the daughter, and he also concluded that they had been influenced by their mother to believe something supernatural was happening to them. LaToya herself was evaluated by more than one psychologist, and these doctors and professionals found her to be guarded, but not experiencing symptoms of psychosis or a thought disorder. Children's Services concluded that although LaToya clearly shared a close bond with her children and she was not abusive, she needed to use alternate forms of discipline that were not directly related to religion and or demonic possession, which, I mean, I don't agree that Children's Services took these kids away, but I think that's really good advice, actually. Avoid forms of discipline directly related to demonic possession. Like, don't punish your kids by telling them they're possessed by the devil. Which, of course, for those of you who love to be offended by everything and jump on everything I say, is not what I'm saying LaToya did. But I'm saying no one should use demonic possession as a form of discipline. Most of the people who had physically been to the house, they believe. They don't believe that LaToya brainwashed her kids. They believe that this family was possessed by something demonic, powerful, and dark. Police officers, CPS workers, Zach Baggins, past residents, they all feel that this house has a portal to hell in it. During filming at the home, Baggins brought in many friends, experts, colleagues to try and find a rational explanation for what was happening. Dr. Barry Taff, who's conducted over 4,500 investigations, he came to test for electromagnetic and geomagnetic energy that could be causing false positive paranormal activity. Apparently, high levels of geomagnetic energy can trick the brain, but levels in the house were normal. He did pick up on some activity in the basement, and he thought he heard dogs barking, at which point he became confused and started wandering around. So people would hear dogs barking in this house all the time, but there was no dogs in the house. The house notoriously has an effect on people, right? It makes them confused, emotional, sometimes angry and aggressive. And in the footage, in the documentary, we can see Dr. Taft sort of touching a spot on the wall, and the camera caught like this blob that was like floating near him. This was on the main floor. And almost immediately after, Dr. Taft felt sick to his stomach. He felt like he was going to throw up, and he had to leave and go back to his hotel. Later, at the hotel, Taft reported feeling high levels of stress and anxiety, and he was very irritable. Suddenly, as he was lying in bed trying to sleep, he heard the sound of a loud bell ringing, and it scared the crap out of him, and he fell out of bed, and that's when he discovered that blood was dripping out of both of his ears. He'd been in good health before, but after flying home, Dr. Taft began to experience massive organ failure, developing infections in his prostate, kidneys, liver, and bladder all at once, like some weird domino effect. Zach Baggins also had an incident with one of his cameramen. It's a guy named Adam. On some of the film, a mask can be seen hovering near Adam, and he got close to it and sort of seemed to go through him or touch him. And not long after this, he claimed he needed to lay down. When no one was watching, Adam got up and he wandered off to the basement alone. Later, he would be found lying on his back in the basement room in the dark, all by himself. After going back to the hotel, Adam reported that he felt like something was stabbing him in the stomach, and he began throwing up blood. While they were all in the hallway of the hotel, the elevator door opened, and Adam claimed he saw a man with the face and head of a goat inside, and this man exhaled black smoke into his face. After this, Adam began acting aggressively. He was screaming Zach's name, trying to find him, and then demanding to be brought back to the house. Adam turned to Zach at one point, and he said, quote, "He doesn't want me, he wants you." And then Adam became so violent towards Zach that he had to be removed from the room and then later the crew. Afterwards, Adam seemed to change. Zach says he went very dark. He started getting into some crazy stuff. You can look at his Instagram, you can look at him online. He seems to have become a horror filmmaker, and according to people online, he started a devil-worshipping band, and he got the number 666 tattooed on his knuckles. That's not according to people online. He actually did get those tattooed on his knuckles. And I will not deny that Adam has a lot of darkness in him. I read some interviews with him that chilled me to the bone. I will link one in the description box. I don't want to talk about it because it's stuff that I don't agree with, but Adam has been a fan of horror movies and horror since he was a child, and the indie films he makes now are certainly terrifying and I would say gratuitously violent, but it's possible that he made everything up, right? It's possible he used Demon House, the house on Carolina Street, to increase his profile and fan base, because if he is an indie filmmaker, who doesn't want to watch a film made by somebody that's possessed by the devil, right? I mean, maybe you guys don't, but I'm crazy like that, and I think that would be very interesting. I think most people who are into horror, like me, and I hope most of you guys, that would be something that we would want to watch, right? So if he has convinced people that he's possessed by this demon and he's putting on this show and getting these tattoos, that could very well be just publicity. Father Mike Maginot did have a theory about why the house tortured LaToya and her children so relentlessly, and it revolves around LaToya's ex-boyfriend. When he had been in the house talking to LaToya for the first time, Father Maginot had asked her if anyone else had ever occupied the house with her and her children, and she mentioned a man she dated for a while. This man had lived with her in a previous home. And when she talked about this man, LaToya reported feeling nauseous, getting chills, and having more headaches. And she would go between shivering and being overheated. So Father Maginot told LaToya, relax, you're obviously going through the gigs here. Call me tomorrow because I have more questions about this ex-boyfriend. And when LaToya did call him, she told Father Maginot that she'd remembered something. When she'd first met her ex-boyfriend, she'd purchased a pair of Air Jordan sneakers, but they went missing soon after she bought them. She also had a stack of family photos that she wanted to blow up and frame, but she could not find the specific picture she wanted, and no one knew where it had gone. The first night her boyfriend moved in, he'd asked LaToya for a pair of her underwear as a souvenir. She said no, but admitted to Father Maginot that he probably took them anyways. LaToya had also gotten a call from a woman who claimed to be the wife of the man that LaToya was dating, and this woman told LaToya that she would regret ever messing with her man. This woman called in September of 2011, and LaToya ended it with the man, but he would continue showing up at her house, which was one of the reasons she decided to relocate to the Carolina Street house. But this guy found out where she lived. Well, he didn't really find out where she lived. He stalked her and followed her home from work. Although LaToya claims the man never stepped foot inside, Father Maginot believes either he or his wife could have placed a curse on LaToya, which is why her sneakers were missing, which is why this dude maybe wanted her underwear, which is why the family picture went missing. And when LaToya moved into the new home, they could have cursed that home as well. LaToya had started having dreams about this man abusing her and tormenting her, and if she was woken up by this dream, she would continue having it as soon as she fell back asleep. Father Maginot believes that there is a portal to hell in the house, but he also believes that this additional curse from this guy and his wife, allegedly, we're not saying they really cursed, I'm not saying they did. I have no proof, I have no receipts, I have no evidence, but allegedly, if they did, this would add another layer of dark activity, and it would sort of just strengthen the activity that was already there. There were a lot of theories, but at the end of the day, the fact that there are so many people who believe, people who are not connected to anything besides this bizarre tale, they're not connected to each other through anything else besides this house. It makes it hard to write it all off. Because you can say that these kids were pretending to be possessed, but you can't explain how this kid walked backwards up a wall and these people saw it. You can't explain that. Zach Baggins claimed he began experiencing double vision within a day of leaving the house, and shortly afterwards he was diagnosed with diplopia, which necessitated him to wear special prism glasses at all times. He bought the house in 2014 and had it demolished in 2016, saving only the staircase that led from the basement to the kitchen, which is now on display at his haunted museum in Vegas, and it sits atop a pile of dirt, also taken from the home's basement. Not sure I would be that brave, Zach. Not sure I would. The staff of the museum claims that following its installation, a group of construction workers walked off the job and refused to come back. Both Baggins and Father Maginot do not believe the land that the house once occupied is safe, though, and right now it's basically just an empty lot still with two houses on either side. Father Maginot said, quote, "Going in unprotected really messed with Baggins, and it also led to the destruction of the house, which is something I disagree with. I think he could have protected a lot more people by owning it, locking it up so people won't mess around with this. Now that it's an open lot, as it mentions in the documentary, people are going there doing seances or whatever, and the police have to get called out to chase people away. These people are in great danger, and there's no way to really protect them. All you need is curiosity and an invitation. So a lot of people are setting themselves up for a very dangerous experience. It's not like you can walk away and it's over with. I mean, once something gets attached, you've got to deal with it." End quote. In 2016, Father Maginot performed a cleansing on the empty lot that the house once stood on, but he doesn't know how effective it was. He claims that the portal was opened, and he believes it is still open to any demon who wants to come through and find a human soul to attach itself to. What do you think about this? I normally like to have a little bit more fun with these, haunting and possession stories, because I do believe in the supernatural and I do believe in ghosts, and I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. But I don't think that every story of a possession or a haunting is true. In fact, I think very few of them are. But this one has me struggling. I don't know. With the eyewitnesses, the police reports, the CPS reports, it makes it hard to believe that this was just a mother who, for some odd reason, convinced her kids they were possessed by the devil. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? She was of sound mind. She was of sound body. No mental health professional could find anything wrong with her. Why would she do that? And I don't know many young kids who all work together in a coordinated effort to, maintain this possession story. Usually kids will have fun with that for like an hour or two, but to continue it, they don't have that kind of attention span. I don't know. I'm not a mental health professional. It could be a lot deeper, but it could be both things. It could be a little bit of both. I really do think there was something pretty dark going on in that house. I do. I can't say anything else because it's a very scary story to me. And you guys should watch Zach Bagans' documentary if you want more information. I'm going to link that in the description box. Thank you so much for joining me for the first video of Harloween. I had so much fun. I'm so glad we're doing this. I'm so glad you all are here. Thank you so much. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay spooky, and I will see you very soon for another Harloween video. And I've got so many cool things planned for you this month. I'm so excited. Thank you guys. I love you so much. See you in the next video. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep. The mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name. Better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.